Okay, thank you very much, Ben, for the kind introduction. Thank you very much for being here and attending the talk. So this is the first time I'm presenting this material. There's not even a paper there at the moment, so this is fresh from the oven, and so I appreciate all comments you might have. So this is joint work with Ada David, who is a joint long-term co-author of mine, and Ali Kashefi, who is a postdoc at Herbert Chair at Bielefeld University. So what is this paper about? So it is about digital platforms. So I think I don't have to say this, but they are basically now ubiquitous in our lives. We think about social networks, shopping platforms, and so on. And one issue which we are looking here is that sometimes things go badly in the transaction on the platform, so someone is harmed, yeah, and it is not the case that the harm was directly, or the platform is directly responsible for that harm. So typical examples here, which you find also in the literature, would be, so you have users uploading illegal material on hosting platforms, such as movies or songs which are under intellectual property rights protection, or think about illegal terrorist propaganda. If you think about shopping platforms where you have third-party sellers, so not the platform itself, but sellers operating on the platform, they sell goods which turn out to be defective. Yeah, something happens, the explosion of a battery is, for example, a case, or a laser pointer which did not work properly, causing damage to the consumer who bought the product. You could also think of other issues like misbehavior, such as sexual harassment of customers for service platforms and so on. And one question in this literature, or in this domain, is to which degree, or should platforms at all be legal responsible for such harm? And traditionally, the answer was based to this question was basically no. Yeah. So traditionally, platforms were pretty much shielded from liability, at least in the United States and in the European Union. And there's a few legislative documents who basically provide for this, and also in case law, there's decisions basically saying, for example, that Amazon cases where the platforms are not considered as sellers and therefore are not supposed to be liable for this kind of accidents. But recently, things seem to change, yeah, and so there are a few cases, maybe this Volga versus Amazon case, we have seen this before, that actually Amazon was held liable. So this was a appeals court decision. Basically was stressed that it, as a distributor of a effective product, Amazon really plays an integral role in this whole transaction, and therefore there's no reason why they should not be part of the set of parties considered for liability. And also there's some other things, there's some other cases and so on, but there's some evidence that things are moving from the legal side of view. And there's also some research in that area, and I'm very happy that Xingyu Hua is also here in the room, who did some of the most famous paper in this area together with Casey Spear. And so these papers, they have basically made a few points which I think are very interesting in this respect. So one point is that even platforms are not in charge of product safety directly, they still have the possibility to affect product safety indirectly. Yeah? So for example, in this paper, Hua and Spear, they have the possibility to spend money in order to detect and identify sellers of harmful products, yeah, and therefore exclude them from the platform. Yeah? Or another argument which had been put forward is that if you hold platforms liable, for example, this will not only affect the incentive of platforms to provide for product safety, but it will also affect the incentives of other parties to invest more or less in products. Yeah, so there's a few papers out there who do this using economic theory, and we also want to contribute to this literature. And in these papers, to the best of our knowledge, it's either the case that there's no consumer pricing at all. So if you think about hosting platforms, which are typically free of charge, or the prices are set by the third-party seller. So if you think about the shopping platform like Amazon, Amazon is not setting the price for a product which is sold on this platform. Yeah? So our point of departure here is basically to look at platform types where we do have a good or product or service provided by some third-party seller, and that party is also largely responsible for product safety. Yeah, but the pricing is in the hands of the platform. Yeah, and so one example we have in mind and how we basically came to this are sharing or ride-hailing platforms such as Uber or Lyft. Right. So here it is the case that you as a consumer, you basically consume the product provided by some driver, yeah, but you book the ride through the platform or the app of Uber, and they set the price for it. Yeah? And so why are we looking at this? Such a setting, such a platform type? First of all, of course, these kind of platforms, they're economically important, right? It's a growing business, these are huge companies. And also because it allows us to explore, we think, a novel channel in this literature, which we call the market channel. Basically, the consumer price set by the platform determines the overall demand for the product, and the demand itself determines the seller's incentive to provide for products. So this is a channel which plays a prominent role in our setting. We'll see the second place up. Yeah? So the framework, the outline for the remaining talk will be, I will introduce the model framework. So I'm an economist. I work with economic theory, but I will not bother you with any analytical stuff. I show you just some payoff functions and then some pictures. So no worries about complicated derivations or things like that. Yeah? And then I will basically go through the analysis of the model and discuss and also some possible extensions, some of which we are currently working on. As I said, this is work in progress. And so please feel free to interrupt at any time. So in our model, there's 4 types of players. We have a policymaker, or legislator, if you want to call him. We have a monopolistic platform. We have one firm providing, or seller, one firm providing a good service, and we have the consumers. Yeah? So whether this is one or several firms, that's not a big problem. The platform is monopolistic. That's also a simplifying assumption. Most of the literature does that, but that is something we can certainly change at some point. So the firm offers a product, and consumers can buy this product, and they have to go via the platform, and the price for the product is set by the platform. Yeah, so think about this Uber case. Yeah. And also the money goes to the platform, and so the firm gets basically a commission from the platform. Yeah? So P is the price for the good, alpha is the commission which the firm gets from the platform. And we take this as exogenously given.
We cannot always shoot questions, right?
Sure.
So here the commission fee is per unit, right? It's not like a percentage.
No, it's a per unit.
So yeah. Because I guess in your introduction you said that the platform will have the power to set prices.
Yes.
But then I'm wondering, instead you allow the seller to set price, but then the platform is a percentage.
So we have not thought about this, but this is certainly might be an alternative interpretation. But our feeling is it certainly would not fit the kind of platform types we consider, right? And also the way we model this is basically a little bit simplistic, as in reality it might be, but I think it's clear that here the price setting is in the hands of the platform and the firm gets some form of compensation. But you're right, we could certainly find a different interpretation where it's actually the firm who sets the price and the platform benefits. But I think it would not be exactly this.
So, what do you mean by firm, an individual or a company that uses a certain platform?
So here the firm would be, the Uber example would be a driver, an independent driver, for example. Maybe seller is a better term. Yeah, that's what. Okay, and then we have some consumers will not play a big role. And so the idea is here basically consumers have, they differ with respect to how much they would like to consume the product. And then here we have a famous economic model in the background of horizontal product differentiation. But at the end, this gives rise to a demand function, which depends on the price set. So there's not much more I have to say here. So Q of P is the demand. So there's no asymmetric information in the model, just some uncertainty with respect to the occurrence of an accident. So this is what comes next. So the product is potentially harmful. Yeah? And so that we call these events basically accidents. Yeah? And so each accident causes a harm, and we normalize the size of the harm to 1, so that's not an issue here. Importantly, the likelihood of an accident, that depends on the choice. So X is the product safety, it's a binary approach, it can be either high or low. Yeah? And this is a choice variable basically of the firm. Yeah? So it can basically implement a low product safety. Yeah? This gives rise to a high accident risk, X upper bar, or it can implement a high product safety, and this leads to a decrease in the accident. So very natural. And of course, high product safety is more expensive than low product safety for the firm. And so in this binary setting, we simply say this comes for free. And if you want to have low product safety, you have to incur the cost. C is this cost. Yeah? And then the question arises, who bears the harm? Yeah? And that's the issue of liability. And so in this very simple model, we basically start from the case where the consumers do not bear any liability. So they suffer the harm, but they get compensated in the course of applying the liability. And the liability rule is set by the policymaker, ex ante. And so beta is the share of the harm borne by the platform, and 1 minus beta is the share of the harm borne by the firm. Yeah? So that is the choice variable of the regulator. And so this looks heavy, but it's just to tell you what is the objective of each play. So we have 4 players. So we have the policymaker who chooses the liability regime to maximize the overall expected surplus, or social welfare, as we call it in economics. Yeah? So you have the consumer surplus from consumption, you have the cost of product safety, and you have the expected harm depending on safety level and demand. So that is expected social welfare. Then we have the platform who decides on the price, and the platform does so in order to maximize its profit. So what is the platform's profit? Well, it reaps the price minus the per unit fee it pays to the firm minus the liability, expected liability payment. X is the likelihood of an accident. Beta is the share of the harm borne by the platform multiplied with the quantity. So we assume away any cost of running the platform or also producing the good. That's why, but this is not interesting. Also, the firm is maximizing its profit. What is the firm's profit? Well, it basically gets the commission per unit minus its liability cost. So that's the likelihood of an accident times 1 minus beta times the quantity, and the firm bears the cost of products. Yeah. So the choice variable of the firm is whether to provide high or low products.
So the here cost, like a fixed cost.
Exactly. That is a very good question. So the cost of providing it applies. If you incur this cost, it is independent of quantity. So this captures not everything, right? So, for example, I don't know, you make one investment, and this makes every unit safer, basically. Yeah. You could also imagine the slightly more complicated case where you invest, and how much you have to invest depends on the quantity. But as it is, it's a one-time investment, which makes it safer, irrespective of how you invest.
Yes. Maybe without change, variable cost.
Yeah, so here it's basically a fixed cost of precaution.
Yeah, without hope.
Yes, I think.
Most of the starting literature, they talk about some components.
Yeah.
Variable cost.
So here, for example, I mean, in this. So here you could think about a training you provide in the Uber case, safety training for drivers, or you install a certain safety feature in the car, a sensor system or a camera system, something like that. Yes, but I'm not sure whether everything would go through qualitatively, but I think you'll see that it's not depending on that. And for the consumers, it's very simple. For a given price, they basically decide whether or not to consume the product. So that's not to go too much. This is very standard. This is the gross utility. This is the preference cost, depending on how much you like it. This is the price. And when your utility is positive, you consume the good. When it's negative. And one assumption we have made here, because consumers are not liable, yeah, so they're made whole through the liability system. Their utility does not depend on the safety provided by the firm and on the beat. This is a simplifying assumption, but I mentioned. Yeah. So that's all. These are the objective functions, and you see here the choice variables. You also see here the timing. I think it's a natural timing. First, we set the liability rule. Then the platform decides on the pricing. Then the firm decides on the product safety. And then the consumers make their consumption decision. And so this is our stage game. And so we solve this backwards, starting with the optimal consumer behavior for a given price. And all you need to know here is that basically our setting allows us to derive a demand function, because you have this different consumer, and that allows you. I don't know whether you are familiar with the hotelling model, but there's nothing fancy in it, just one way of generating consumer demand. And so you see this is basically a decreasing function in price, a linear demand function, the simplest case. You have a scaling parameter, which is the gamma, which is the gross benefit consumers have, and the T is basically the measure of how sensitive they are. The platforms, sorry, if the product is not exactly perfectly stated. Yeah. So all we need here is that is a negative, linearly negative demand function. Okay, so now let's look at the safety provision of the firm. So basically, the firms can say, I save the cost of high product safety, and I live with a higher accident risk and higher expected liability costs, or I incur this cost C and I reduce the accident risk. So it's a basic comparison of these two costs, and we call this basically an incentive condition, and the firm will provide high product safety if leads to basically a higher profit. And so from this, we can determine a critical price, a critical platform price, consumer price, such that the firm is just willing to provide high products. So this is the P bar. Yeah? And you see this depends on the beta, of course. Yeah? And it depends on the cost of providing high. So intuitively, if the cost of providing high product safety is high, but then the consumer price needs to be really low because this generates a high demand, and then this gives the firm the incentive to invest. Yeah? Analogously, if the firm bears more liability, so beta is for the platform, so if beta increases, yeah, the platform's share decreases. Yeah? And so in order to keep up the incentive to provide high product safety, the price must be lower, so demand is higher to counter that. So that's all perfectly intuitive. This is this market. Yeah? So we could interpret this P bar as the maximum price, consumer price, such that the firm is willing to provide high products. Yeah? And so now you see, again, let me just emphasize this channel. So what is now providing the incentives for the firm is not just the beta or the 1 minus beta, but it is also the overall demand for the product. And that is what we call the market channel. So if the platform sets a low price, that gives rise to high demand, and that gives basically rise to high expected liability cost for a given beta, and therefore the firm has an incentive to bring this down, to invest, to get X lower bar instead of X higher. So this is this channel. And basically, we can also derive some upper bound on the platform liability, basically saying if the platform liability is above that value, there's no way you can incentivize the firm to provide high products. So I'm not stressed that throughout the talk. Okay, now we have now characterized optimal consumer behavior for a given price. We have characterized the optimal investment decision of the firm for a given price and a given liability scheme. We now characterize the optimal pricing behavior of the platform, anticipating what it will generate in terms of incentives to provide product safety and consumer decisions. So this is getting a little bit more complex. Yeah? And so what's going on is here that the platform faces a fundamental trade-off. Yeah? It's a trade-off between the revenue generated from the consumer side and the expected liability costs has to pay in the case of accidents. Yeah? And so we show in the paper that there's basically two pricing strategies, or 2.5 pricing strategies. One strategy is to choose monopoly pricing. So recall the platform is a monopolist, so it can choose a monopoly price. So in fact, we have actually two monopoly prices, one for each level of product safety, basically. Yeah, so I said 2.5 choices. You will see this in a second. And you see this is just a standard monopoly price. So this is Microeconomics 101, right? So the demand enters here, and as a cost, you see also this beta. This is the marginal cost of the firm, basically, the marginal liability cost. Yeah? And you also see if the platform is not liable, then if beta is equal to 0, then the monopoly price does not depend on whether you have high or low product safety, because the platform just doesn't care about this. It doesn't bear any liability, so no point in this. So this monopoly price is the same if beta is equal to 0. And importantly, it is increasing in beta. So recall this threshold price, which just leads the firm to invest in product safety was decreasing in beta, while the monopoly price itself is increasing in beta. It's just a marginal cost increase, basically, if the beta increases. Yeah? So when the platform chooses monopoly pricing, well, obviously, by definition, it gets the maximum revenue from the consumers. Yeah? But as you all know, under the monopoly price, the quantity is pretty low, inefficiently low. Yeah? And therefore, not so many consumers buy the product. And therefore, the firm might have no incentive to provide high product safety. The demand might not be enough to induce the firm to invest in products. Yeah? So this is what happens. There's monopoly pricing. Alternatively, the platform can not insist on monopoly pricing. It can choose a lower price, therefore pumping up demand. Yeah. So you lose revenue from consumers, yeah, because you're departing from the monopoly allocation, basically a solution, but the higher quantity might incentivize the firm to provide more products. Yeah? So these are basically the two choices.
Could I just ask a question here? So this is where you have this assumption of a fixed cost, right, for providing a high quality, the high precaution product, right? Because the way the logic works is if there's a lot of the quantity demand is high, then that way you can kind of spread out the cost of providing a safer product. Is that where the assumption?
No, because the investment, or the product safety investment, this is binary choice. Right. So either you do it or whether you don't do it. If you have this as a variable cost, also depending on the quantity, it would slightly look differently, but the effect would still be there. That if demand is higher, you would tend to this generates higher incentives. So if you have a fixed cost function, you would still increase basically if you linear function, you would still increase the amount of safety investment. Here, because this is binary, this yes or no, but I'm sure there will be some qualitative changes, but the basic story will not change. And so obviously, you will see in a second, the interesting case is the one where you don't get for free a high product safety if you choose monopoly prices.
Yeah. Also, the timing matters.
The timing?
Yeah. Currently, the platform set price first.
Yes.
Then the firm will take effort.
Yes.
You reverse this to.
We have not looked at it, but
yeah. And also, there's a discuss whether.
Yeah.
Whether the platform can throwbacks.
Yeah. Yeah. So this would be something to think about. Yeah. So we thought it more natural, basically, to have the price decision first, and then the firm adjusting its behavior for a given pricing scheme. But I agree, it's not. I mean, I think the liability rule should come first. That's obvious. But concerning the timing between the platforms and the firm's decision, this would be something. Okay, so pictures from now on. Yeah. So it turns out that we get one key condition which is quite important here, and that is the question: do we get high product safety under monopoly prices? And whether this answer is yes or no depends on whether, for no platform liability, when the beta is equal to 0, it depends on whether the monopoly price, which is the same for both axes, is bigger or smaller than this threshold price P hat. Yeah? And so the left panel shows the case where the P hat is above the monopoly price at beta equals 0. This is this panel, I explain it in a second. And the right panel shows the case where this is not true. Yeah? So in the left panel, I have 3 functions here. This is the orange function is the monopoly price under low product safety. The green function is the monopoly price under high safety. So I just go back, you see, this is just plotting this here. And just the slope changes in beta, x upper bar, x lower bar, and they are the same at beta equals 0. So this looks like this. The blue curve is the p-hat function. Yeah? This was the maximum price for which the firm is willing to provide high product safety. And then these functions, they have some dotted segments. Yeah. So actually, I don't understand why this is dotted at the point, but for the monopoly functions, you see, if the monopoly price is below the p-hat function, then I get high product safety. So this is a solid line. If it's above, right, then it's it's not achievable, it's not incentive compatible, right? So as soon as these two lines cross, high product safety is dotted because it is above the, so you don't get it. It's not consistent with the platform's IC condition. And similarly for the orange function, right? So yeah, you get high product safety here because the price is below this threshold price, and once they intersect, you get basically the solid. Yeah? This is the case where the cost of high safety is relatively small. Yeah? In the right panel, it's the other way around. There the cost is relatively high, and there you see that at 0, this p-hat function is below the monopoly price. So here, if you set the monopoly price, there's no chance you will get high products. And so only the orange curve is solid, while the green one is dotted because it's not consistent with the firm's incentive. Okay, and so what we do now is just to illustrate, to characterize in the paper, this is a formal proofs, but here just to illustrate, I now use this figure to tell you about the optimal pricing of the firm. Yeah, and so what we find is, if we are in this left case here, yeah, then the black line indicates the optimal pricing for the platform as a function of platform liability. Yeah? And so how this looks like is basically the platform starts with monopoly pricing, thereby inducing high safety investment, which is nice. Yeah? But then you reach a point where this is no longer feasible. Right? As beta increases, you shift more and more liability to the platform. This makes it more difficult to incentivize the firm to invest. Yeah? So at this point, based on monopoly pricing, oh, sorry. Did I? Okay. Either I insist on monopoly pricing, but then I get a jump in my payoff function because product safety will jump downwards, or I deviate from monopoly pricing, yeah, along this p-hat curve, just that I keep the firm investing, but now I'm losing revenue because I'm no longer using the monopoly. And this goes on as beta increases further and further, you see, because this function is decreasing in beta, this is getting more and more costly for the platform because the price reduction is getting really tough, right? It loses a lot of revenue. Yeah? And at some point, it says, no, come on, I give up. Let's forget about product safety, right? I jump back to monopoly pricing, but of course, to the upper price because I get only low product safety. So this is, it's not trivial to characterize, but this is how it looks. Now, the second case, I spare you, this is just a knife edge case. Now let's come to the other case. So recall, we had these two cases, and I'm fine-tuning this a little bit. We have captured this one at the knife edge case. Now I talk about this case here, and it turns out that two situations can arise, depending on how big the C is above this critical level, which determines whether I'm in the left or in the right panel. Yeah? So if the C is a little bit about this critical case, so it's not too high, so the difference between those two is not too large, yeah? What the platform will optimally do, it will start with monopoly pricing, yeah? And say, okay, I know I'm not getting high product safety, but beta is still low, I can manage that. My liability share is relatively small, yeah? And then I jump downwards to this B hat function where I get high product safety, but I have this loss in revenue. And then again, I jump upwards and go back to monopoly pricing. So this is one option, depending for how big the investment cost is. And the last case is where this cost is really high. This is not optimal either. So then it's very simple. Here the platform says, no, it's too expensive. Sorry, the firm basically says, I will never invest unless you really give me a huge discount. And the platform said, no, let's forget about this. I will bear the higher cost of liability, but I'm not going to reduce the price by so much. Yeah? So when C is very high, the firm is very reluctant to invest, and the price reduction which the platform needs to give relative to the monopoly price is just too big, and therefore we always see monopoly price. Okay, so here I thought maybe someone is interested. I'm not showing this, the former slides. And now what is still missing is now the optimal liability assignment of the regulator. Yeah? And as you see, the expected welfare depends basically on the quantity, which determines allocative efficiency, and the expected harm. Yeah? So if I plug in the optimal behavior, so then we have basically two kinds of distortions here. Yeah? So the first distortion comes via the quantity channel. So under monopoly pricing, right? I have the monopoly, the triangle loss. So in our model, it's really a triangle because we have a linear demand function, right? And so this distortion increases with beta because the monopoly price is increasing in beta. Yeah? On the other hand, if I choose the lower price P hat as the platform, yeah, then I get a smaller distortion because the platform only does this if it's below the monopoly price, and distortion is getting smaller in beta because this P hat thing is decreasing. Yeah, so this is the incentive with respect to the quantity, and with respect to the product safety. Under monopoly pricing, I get it depending on which monopoly price I get. When the pricing is at P hat, I always get high product safety, but then I have also the cost of investment, which I also features into the social welfare. Yeah? And so what do we get now? Basically, we find that the optimal platform liability rule beta star is either, I said beta star equal to 0, which means no platform liability, yeah, or I jump to that liability scheme for which the firm is just willing, the platform is just willing to charge this threshold price instead of jumping upwards to this monopoly price. So if you go to these figures here, let me just go here. So this is basically this price here, right? Just indifferent between jumping here or here. That is this. Yeah? You see? Here's again, you see this is the optimal price. So you want to minimize the distortion, so you go at beta equals 0 because it doesn't change the product safety. And also here, you want to have the lowest price because when at this point there's always high product safety, so the price will be decisive, and so you go as far down as possible. Whether this point is smaller than this point depends a little bit on the parameters of the model, and therefore we have either or. Yeah. And if you have only if you have no chance of getting high product safety, you end up with monopoly pricing. Again, you will not put any liability on the platform. Yeah? And so what you could do is now, for example, do a little bit more of comparative statics of the whole equilibrium here with respect to this cost of investment, which is our crucial parameter here. And you see that the whole thing is highly non-monotone, right? If the cost is very low, you start with zero platform liability, then you jump up, and then you have a decreasing function here. And then at some point, when the cost is very high, so this somehow corresponds to these pictures here, right? Then you, at some point, you are in this case here where you end up with monopoly pricing everywhere. And so the optimal rule is again equal to zero. And then you can do a little bit more here. For example, when you check the input, the impact of this C on, for example, overall expected welfare in equilibrium, you see again, there's also here a non-monotonic effects. Yeah, first of all, when there's no platform liability, you have this direct cost effect, which decreases social welfare, and then as the C increases, you change the pricing. Yeah. And also the optimal liability rule, and you see that it gives rise to a hump-shaped profile. And for very high levels, again, we go back to beta equals 0, and then basically social value becomes. Okay, so as I said, we are currently working on this. I would have loved to send the first paper draft. And I'm working on it, but I don't have it at the moment. There are some things we are discussing in terms of extensions. So you have already pointed out to some issues, and I'm happy to discuss more. So one thing we might want to endogenize is here is fee. At the moment, this is exogenously given. I think the shortcut we are taking is okay. What we don't want to do is a take it or leave it offer. So don't want to put all the bargaining power on the platform side, because then becomes residual claimant, and then the incentive issues between the platform and the firm, they go away. But unless we have any kind of sharing the surplus, like single Nash bargaining or something like that, would, I think, generate similar results in terms of the distortions and responses to that. What is more tricky, I guess, is to also have the platform decide on product safety directly. So first of all, I think it makes the story less nice, because we want to make the point, can it be optimal to assign platform liability, even if the platform is not directly involved in this? But of course, this is an interesting case. And so yeah, at the moment, we have not yet made a really great attempt in going through this. It's getting complicated. But what we started to think of is to say it suffices if one of the two makes a safety decision, but if you have them both, you get many more cases to consider. So I guess this is a very serious extension. Yeah. So as far as I know, Xinhua, maybe you know better, but I don't know if any paper who has this bilateral investment case plus this pricing decision is really getting very complicated. So I'm not so sure whether we want to touch this. We have assumed one firm, which is okay if they are symmetric and independent. So whether this you have one driver or you have a zillion of independent drivers, this is like in the principal agent model, right? Unless there's no connection, that doesn't change anything. It becomes more interesting, maybe, if you assume some heterogeneity, for example, with respect to their cost of effort provision. And then, of course, the decisions will drive which kind of firms you get on board and so on. So there might be an interesting route here to go. We have also assumed the way that consumers be a part of the liability. That was nice from an analytical point of view. And I think that is, especially if you think about this rate ride-hailing platforms, you're a customer, right? You're not driving the car yourself. You're not supposed to be you have no chance of affecting the likelihood of an accident unless you attack the driver or something like that. Yeah, you're just sitting in the back of the seat of the car, and you should not bear any liability. So, but still, maybe the liability regime doesn't work perfectly or something like that. You could imagine it gets more complicated because then the utility will also depend on these variables. So again, as a starting point, we decided let's not include this, but it can be done. Negligence is another issue, of course. That's the system we are using here. We call it strict partial liability. There's no negligence here. This is something we could take into account. And of course, because we have this hoteling framework here, we could in principle have platform competition. There's some price competition. It's not the setting for the Bertrand paradox, but we have these horizontally differentiated platforms. But I don't think it will change too much. It will just make things much more. Not so sure whether this is a route to go. Okay, so let me conclude. I presented a very baseline version of a paper I'm currently working on about platform liability. It's one certain platform type is basically where a third-party seller of the product is in charge for product safety, and where the price which consumers pay is set by the platform. Yeah, and so we basically zoom in on this market force channel where basically incentives for product safety is created by the pricing decision of the platform and the resulting demand. Yeah, and we, I think, get some interesting results on how this liability affects the incentive structure in this setting here, platform pricing, product safety decisions. And we do find that platform liability sometimes would be the optimal thing to do in our setting. And I don't know, there's this old paper by Polinsky and Shevel, which basically stress the role of market forces when it comes to products liability. It's a little bit a different channel they have outlined here, but it's in the same sense as our paper here. We basically, they also make the point that the markets can provide for incentives rather than if you insist on one individual party bearing part of it. And one more sentence, I have been working on liability for autonomous systems like autonomous vehicles. And we have a model version where we could basically use a similar model like this, where the AV, autonomous vehicle, would be the platform, where you have consumers, and where the firm would be other parties in a traffic situation like pedestrians or something like that, which also determines the likelihood of an accident. So this would be going in this direction. So I hope I'm well in time. This is, oh, I have one last slide.
Next page.
Oh.
And then next.
Oh, anyway, just thank you. It was just. Okay. Okay. Did I introduce this blank sheet? I don't know. Okay, so this is my last slide. Thank you very much for your attention, and I have questions.